The Retirement Cafe Podcast, episode 22, The Court of Protection, When Powers of Attorney Go Wrong, with Fiona Heald.
Retired or thinking about retirement? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe Podcast. In each episode, we bring you an important conversation with insight, tips and knowledge, all designed to help you live a fulfilling and successful life in retirement. Here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner and Accredited Later Life Advisor, Justin King.
So, welcome again to another episode of the Retirement Cafe Podcast. Yet again, you may remember Fiona Heald from Moore Blatch Solicitors, who joined me last time to talk about why we all need powers of attorney, and how, in essence, she can help, or any other solicitor local to you can help do that. Since that conversation, one thing has been troubling me, and that is what happens when you haven't got one, and also what happens when they go wrong. So, welcome, Fiona. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again.
So, big questions, I'm afraid.
Yes.
What do you do if you haven't got one? Your mum's suddenly gone, I don't know, got dementia or something, or someone's had a stroke or what have you, and we haven't got a power of attorney in place. What on earth do you do?
Right, well, more big questions from you. Thank you very much. We're going to start with health and welfare, because that is, in essence, simpler, if I can use that word. If you don't have a power of attorney for health and welfare, then the big questions are usually doctors, medical. Do we do this? Do we resuscitate? What do we do? How do we deal with things? And if there is no power of attorney, the doctors are in charge.
Right.
Most doctors will talk to the family.
Yeah.
Again, most of the time that's nice and easy if it's a husband and wife or spouses or partners, things like that. It gets a little more interesting with children, especially if there's more than one, because they like to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got children, or you don't want your children necessarily to be involved, or for whatever reason, then the doctors will make that decision.
Right.
They have to do a thing called best interests, which is a bit like the abracadabra of this world. They have to think, what are your wishes and feelings? So if you said to somebody, keep me alive at whatever cost, they have to bear that in mind.
Yeah.
If you said quality of life over quantity of life, then they have to bear that in mind.
Okay.
But they have to sit there and consider all the options, so that there is a best interests consideration as to what's best for you. So keeping people out of pain, keeping people with dignity, things like that.
Yeah.
If we're looking at before the end of life, or you're not in hospital, where do you live? So typical scenario might actually be you've got a diagnosis of dementia, you've been at home, but now things aren't going so well. Where do you live? Should you move into a home? What type of home? Where should that home be? Without a power of attorney, it's going to be adult services.
Right.
Okay, and what they will do, again, is look at best interests.
And that's run by the local authority. Right.
Absolutely. So the local authority should allocate you a social worker.
Yeah.
That social worker will then gather information about you, work out what the best thing for you. So if you are going to an old home with really steep stairs, there's no toilet downstairs, they might have views about you going home versus you live in a modern bungalow with a wet room.
Right.
That you could be moved around in a wheelchair or something like that. So they've got to work out what's best for you. So the trouble with local authorities and with doctors is they don't know you.
Yeah.
They will do their job, like all professions. There are good ones, bad ones. They will talk to people, but they don't know you. And that's why health and welfare powers of attorney are so good, because they know you, they know what you like, how you would like to do things. So my idea of hell would be to put into a nursing home in the middle of a city and have no access to music or latte. I need my morning latte. But that would be something that I would hate. Social services wouldn't know that about me.
No.
People who know me would know, right, actually put her in the countryside, put her next to the sea, that's where she would be most calm and that's what she likes.
Yeah.
Make sure there's some music going on in the background, that type of thing. If we talk about property and finance, everything gets a little interesting at that stage. Because you do have that nightmare phone call. This has happened now, what do we do? So if there is no power of attorney, then we need to look at two different options.
Right.
Option one is, dependent upon what happened, can we wait generally 4 weeks to see if that person gets better? So if somebody's had a stroke, let's see if they recover, because we have no idea. If they've got an infection or they've gone suddenly downhill, is that because they need to be treated? Will they be better after they've been treated? Can we get them back in charge, or at least back in deciding who would be in charge?
But what happens if you need some money within that 4 weeks?
This is where things get a little bit interesting.
Right.
Because whatever we do, we can't necessarily access money within that 4 weeks. Okay. So this is why it's really important when looking at financial advice, and I know this is what you do, making sure that with couples, that each of them have access to money so that they are able to pay the bills. Get your bills set up by direct debit, and then it doesn't matter what's going on, the bills are still going to be paid.
Right.
Have your own little account, even if everything comes out the main account, have your own little account so that you can get hold of money. You can get buses or taxis or wherever to get to the hospital and visit. So it's really important that each person does have their own bit of money to do that.
Yeah.
If we know that things aren't going to get better, if we know that, unfortunately, they talked about doing a power of attorney, but they never got round to it, real life is so much more interesting than doing legal stuff, then we're talking about the Court of Protection. And the Court of Protection has had some bad press recently. Not necessarily deserved, to be fair, because the Court of Protection is the court that is there to help people. They're the backup plan.
Okay.
They're our plan B. So without a power of attorney, your lady has come in and said, my husband can no longer deal with things. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
We need to look at applying to the Court of Protection, and what the court do is they'll appoint a deputy under a court order.
Right.
Similar to an attorney, but it works slightly differently.
Okay.
So the problem, if you like, with the Court of Protection is we're now looking about 6 months-ish to get a court order. We can get emergency orders to release money sooner.
Right.
But potentially it's 6 months before we can do anything. And if something happens to me, I can't then decide who would deal with my finances.
No.
So if I've done a power of attorney and I've chosen you to be my attorney, that was my choice.
Sure.
If I've lost capacity and I can't say anything, you could apply, but you may not be the person I want to act.
No.
You may be the person who I really wouldn't want to deal with matters.
Yeah.
Family arguments can break out because one person will think, I'm the oldest child, I should be in charge. Or somebody else will say, no, I should be in charge, and that's not good. Going back to lovely families, everybody gets on.
Yeah.
Then yes, we apply to the Court of Protection. What we would look at...
Is this just an application, or do you actually have to go to court?
It depends.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we'll go with let's pretend everything works really smoothly. Applying to the Court of Protection means that we need to get a mental capacity assessment to show that that person can't deal with their property and finances.
So your GP might do that?
Might do that. Some GPs won't because it's private work and it's outside the NHS remit.
Okay.
There are other people that will do it, but always start off with the GP. They're the person who knows them best.
Yeah.
You need to have an application form to say what you want. I want to look after my husband's finances. You have a form which goes into great detail about the finances, which is possibly where you would come in really handy, because you could help them say, well, we know there's this income or that. You will need to know about property valuations, who owns the property, is there a business, etc., etc. All of that goes onto a form. The deputies, however many you apply, have to fill out a form to say, I promise to do the job properly.
Right.
And it sets out what you do, and there's a lot involved in being a deputy. And then what happens is there's about 50, 60 pages that need to be completed.
Fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All goes off to London, and the Court of Protection up there will then issue the application. And when they issue the application, you have to tell people, because what we want is to make sure that nobody's suddenly going to argue. Normal families, you tell the children. There might be other relatives that you need to tell. It depends. The court like 3 people to be told, but if the spouse is person 1 and you've only got 2 children, big tick, we've done 3 people.
Right.
It's a lot easier.
Right.
You have to also tell the person who's mentally incapable. And this is where a lot of people get quite worried, because they'll say, I need to go and see my husband and tell him I'm taking over the finances, and he's not going to understand.
No.
How does that work? How can that possibly be a sensible thing? And the reason they do it is a protection. Because if that person does understand, then we shouldn't be at the Court of Protection. If that person doesn't understand, we should be at the call to protection. We have had cases where we've gone in and said, we need to do this. And they've said, oh, no, I don't want this person to act. I want that person to act.
Right.
They can't say anything else, but that's what they want. So at least we've got some idea of what they want to be able to do.
Okay.
Pretend they had no idea because they're sadly too ill, dementia's too much, or they're too poorly. Then we tell the court that it's been served, and then we sit back and wait quite a long time.
Right.
Because the judge has to look at it, or somebody at the court has to look at it and just see if it's a sensible thing that you're doing. Is it right? Is everything, all the ducks in a row? Being a deputy, a bit like an attorney, is a really onerous job.
Yeah.
This time, though, as a deputy, you have to take out a security bond.
Oh.
And in English, what that means is, if you are my deputy and you run off with all my money, then we can call in the bond.
Yeah.
The insurance company that you took the bond out with will pay me back all my money, so I'm not left out of pocket.
Right. Great.
The insurance company will then come after you
Ah.
because they like being paid back.
Of course.
They're an insurance company. They don't like paying out money. So I'm looked after.
So who pays for the bond? Who pays for the insurance policy?
Comes out of my money.
The deputies or
No, my money. If it's my
Okay.
if you're my deputy,
Yep.
then all these costs come out of my money.
right. Okay.
So the application fee, put my teeth back in.
Yeah.
The £385 will come out of my money.
Okay.
The fee, if you need to get a doctor or somebody to sign off to say I'm mentally incapable, will come out of my money. When we get to the security bond, that comes out of my money.
Right.
And then once the security bond is issued, so that the court will look at how much money I've got and go, right, Fiona needs cover for £400,000. So if you run off with £400,000, she's covered, she gets her money back.
This is an expensive premium, maybe.
This is well, not necessarily, because the premiums for that might be about £350, £500 a year.
Okay.
Like all insurance, you insure your house.
Sure.
You don't
No,
pay
no,
for
no,
the whole house each
absolutely,
year. You just pay a bit. So that will come out every year because every year we need to renew it. Then what will happen is the court will release the order, and that order will give you the authority to look after my property and finance.
Right.
And it will sit there and say, you can do this, you can do this, you can't do that.
Right.
So it might be, they might say, you can't sell the house.
Yeah.
We'll give you a smaller security bond because you're not going to get hold of our biggest asset. Okay?
Sure.
So what they're looking at is what can you run off with?
Yeah.
Because obviously they have to be fairly cynical and assume that all people are going to be a little bit naughty.
Sure.
They're not. Once the order turns up, we then have the interesting job of getting a deputy bank account set up.
Ah.
So whereas with an attorneyship, if I'm your attorney, I can go into your bank and say, I'm attorney, please put me on to the account. With a deputy, I have to have a whole new bank account that says, I am your deputy. So what happens then is the Office of the Public Guardian are the people who supervise you as deputy.
Okay.
So they'll charge you £100 for thinking about how to supervise you.
Right.
And then they will charge you £320 every year to supervise you. Unlike attorneys don't have to produce accounts. They need to keep accounts.
Yeah.
Anybody managing anybody else's affairs needs to keep accounts. But for this, you are going to have to produce accounts every year to the Office of the Public Guardian to say how you've spent my money, what you've done, what decisions you made. So there's a lot of paperwork that's involved, and that will cost you £320 per annum.
Right.
So if you add up all of that...
Yeah, starting to get quite expensive.
It's very expensive. If you add somebody like me in the mix, because I have to help you with it, then applying to the Court of Protection and dealing with all of that, somewhere north of 3,000 by the time you've added the VAT in would not be unusual because there's all these fees and costs. Versus, even if you get a lawyer involved with powers of attorney, 1,500 maybe, 2,000.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference. And once the power of attorney is set up, no more costs. Court protection, there are ongoing costs every year. There's the premium and then there's the supervision fee.
Sure.
So it's great because there's more safeguards.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot more eyes on what are you doing, why are you doing it. There's a lot more supervision. The Office of the Public Guardian have visitors who will come visit you and say, how are you getting on? How can we help you? Are you doing your job? Are you getting the right benefits? And things like that, which I'm sure you'll have already made sure you've spoken to the family about and said, you can get this, you can do that. But otherwise, there's more safeguards, but much, much more expensive.
Now, I can imagine that occasionally that they do go wrong.
They do. They do.
And people may not be as correct with other people's money as they possibly should have been.
Absolutely.
What do you do then?
Right. There are two categories of people.
Right.
There's the innocent offenders.
Okay.
Who honestly thought they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
The biggest problem we find is with people who think that if mum says, "Oh no, of course you must have £1,000, dear," they can have £1,000.
Yes.
Under all types of managing somebody else's money, you can't make gifts unless there's a really tiny amount of leeway.
Right.
But for anything outside that, you're going to need a court order to actually make the gifts. Because again, that's to protect me, to make sure that all my money doesn't go away. We have people who will say, well, mum would want to pay for my wedding or would pay for my car or wants to set up the grandchild at university or something like that. Again, all of those innocent ways of people taking money. And I'm sure that person did want to, but they haven't got the mental capacity to say so.
Right.
If we have those, Office of the Public Guardian is normally the first port of call. So if I've got two children and one of them's spending all my money and gifting all my money and the other one's going, what's happening?
Yeah.
That child can go off to the Office of the Public Guardian and say, I don't think things are going right.
Right.
Doesn't matter whether my other child is attorney or deputy, Office of the Public Guardian is your first port of call. If care fees aren't being paid, which is quite a common thing, local authority, adult services will also go to the Public Guardian and they can do their own internal investigation. I sometimes get phone calls saying, what do I do now? Go to the Office of the Public Guardian because they've got much more authority. They can call the attorney or deputy to account.
And is that a quick process or?
Yes and no. It depends what's going on. Like most things in law, we have a yes and no answer. But the reason why I say go to the Office of the Public Guardian is because they have the authority to say, yes, you did give that car away, but quite frankly, it was only £5,000 and they've got £500,000. So can you apply to the court for authority to just confirm that gift? That would be fine. Or no, we can quite clearly see there is loads of money and they have a history of gifting. So yes, just go to the court and get an order to carry on.
Okay.
That's fine.
Right.
And the court will say, please do that. The other category of person, the one who sits there and rubs their hands with glee or says, but I'm entitled because I'm the one who's been looking after mum, or mum's got all this money and I'm struggling. I don't know where I'm going to find the mortgage from. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Those are the ones get a little more interesting. Again, somebody will generally report. Bad news travels really quickly on these things.
Right.
Banks sometimes will report them if they're worried that money's going out every week and being transferred. Care fees, if they're not being paid, again, local authorities, care homes will start to get involved. Other people. It's amazing when there's money. Other people like to get involved and say what's happening next. So what happens is that Office of Public Guardian will call them to account. If they're not happy, then they will just apply to the court to have them removed.
Right.
So if they refuse to answer the OPG's questions, the Office of Public Guardian's questions, or the Office of Public Guardian will say, I'm sorry, that's just way too much. However innocently you thought that's never going to happen, we need to have you removed. Then they will apply to the court and the court will say, thou shall not be the attorney or deputy anymore and you are out.
Right.
And then what will happen is usually a professional gets to take over unless there's somebody else. So if you've got two attorneys, one's been bad and one's been good, they might say, right, you can take over. But what we'll do is we'll stop you acting as attorney and we'll turn you into a deputy because then we can keep oversight of you going forward.
Right.
So the court has a lot of power. Unfortunately, what sometimes happens is people will say, but if they've taken the money, it's theft. We want the police to act. And that's a whole different scenario because that's criminal charges.
Yeah.
Lots of people don't necessarily want to take family to court. Plus, the other problem is that the police aren't always necessarily able to take action against that person. So although I don't like it, sometimes the win is we've stopped them and we've got the money back.
Right.
And that's not great.
No.
But at least the person I'm worried about is now put back in the position they should be.
Great. So, it's sounding very obvious why in the previous podcast that you said, everyone needs to take out a power of attorney and get all this covered off way before it gets into this pickle. What kind of amount of people have put in powers of attorney in the UK?
Okay, sadly, only about 7%.
Wow.
A tiny, tiny fraction of the population have done it.
Okay.
Lots of people will think it'll never happen to me.
Yeah.
Lots of people will think, well, we've set up other ways of dealing with it, like joint accounts or internet banking or things like that, which I mentioned last time. But most people, quite naturally, don't want to hand over that power.
No.
And the one thing I would say is just because you've done a power of attorney doesn't mean to say those people have got power over you. I've done both types of power of attorney. So there is somebody who can deal with my finances and somebody who can make health and welfare decisions. I certainly don't want anybody accessing my bank account, and I certainly don't want anybody telling me where I should live.
No.
But I have them, and if something happens, they are there.
Yeah.
And that's a much better system to have it. You don't need to hand out documents to people. Even if you did hand out a health and welfare power, if you're mentally capable, they can't use it.
No.
So if they went to the doctor and went, Mum's supposed to do this, doctor will go, I don't care, your mum's fine, go away.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
But they are really, really good to have because you are in control. And it's all about making sure that you decide what happens next. Court of protection works really well for some things. The other issue with court protection, though, is I've talked a lot about property and finance. Getting a court order for health and welfare is a very different scenario.
Okay.
They're not so keen to hand out general orders that cover everything.
No.
They might do an order that says where somebody should live or what should happen next, end of life. We see those in the news. But they're a lot harder to do. So if you want somebody to be able to do stuff, then you need both types of power of attorney.
Okay. So there's a very clear message there that with this ageing population that we have, from the baby boomers and they're now reaching retirement and moving into that stage, we know more and more people are going to be living longer, but also as we live longer, we're going to suffer illnesses and issues, etc., that powers of attorney are just absolutely unbelievably paramount of importance, aren't they?
Absolutely, yes. Providing they're treated with the respect of this is powerful, let me get the right people to do the right thing at the right time, then they will resolve most of the issues, and somebody who knows you can be passionate about you and say this is what they would like, and that's what I think is really important. If I can't speak, I want somebody to be me.
Yeah. And, I wonder whether sometimes I see that the OPG situation is a real great fallback. It's a lovely thing. We've got this service available for people. You don't want to end up in that position, I wouldn't have thought. But I can imagine there is a part of the UK community who just thinks, I can't afford a power of attorney.
Yep.
I can't put this, they're of limited means. What do we do for those people? And then the idea that then they've got to go through OPG and pay even more money, it seems right. Sorry, court of protection. So court of protection. It seems to be, how do we balance that out?
If we've got somebody on limited means, then we will have a look at alternatives.
Right.
So if I've got somebody who is potentially in rented accommodation and they've only got benefits, then we might look at using the DWP appointee route, which allows somebody to be you for benefits purposes.
Right.
So they will have a bank account into which all your benefits get paid and they can make sure everything gets paid automatically.
Okay.
The trouble is, if you've got money in an account in your name already, that's frozen. There's not a lot we can do about that.
Right.
If we've got somebody who, for health and welfare, they're already in a nursing home and the conversation has already happened about do not resuscitate or things like that. Again, I might say, well, we're already towards the end. We've dealt with problem one, which is where you're going to live.
Yeah.
You like it there. That's lovely. Let's just tell the doctors that's what your wishes are for end of life, and they will take those into account.
Right.
So there are ways around it.
Yeah.
But most people, in my book, 99.99% of people with a property, they're going to need a power of attorney or something like that. The main reason is, sorry.
No problem.
There's a twiddly bit of law.
Yeah.
If you and I own a property jointly and you become mentally incapable, then I can't sell the property on my own.
No.
If I'm your only attorney because something's gone wrong and I thought, I could just be your attorney, we'll look after each other, we still can't sell the property because I can't be me and you.
Of course.
So we need somebody else.
Yeah.
So again, that's making sure the attorneys are done right to cover all of the things.
Yeah.
But It is difficult because people can't afford it. We do have the conversations where we say, well, which bit's more important? Do we want to have one? Do we want to have the other? Which bit can we live without to try and reduce things down?
And am I right in saying there is a reduction in fees for people with low income?
Under £12,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if someone's just on a state pension, and they may be eligible for that.
They may. You've got to prove it.
Okay.
The Office of the Public Guardian.
Okay.
So one of the issues that we have is if you've got a couple and one of them has lots and lots of pensions, and the other person is just under state retirement age, because obviously that's dramatically gone up, they have no income.
Yeah.
We have difficulty proving they have no income.
Right.
We can, but it just makes it more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. So at least there's some kind of fallback, because I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of people who this is not on their radar to do.
No.
We're very lucky, I think, with the people that we, together advise. They're generally of fairly affluent kind of means, which is why they seek advice. But there's a lot of people who will listen to this podcast who this will be great information for, but possibly haven't thought about it or haven't budgeted for this type of expense.
Absolutely.
This has been really, really interesting again, Fiona. Thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything I may have missed or you wanted to say, or is there any information around this issue that you think that we wanted to touch on?
Again, I think it's just getting advice.
Okay.
Understanding.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want my clients to do is make an educated decision. So if I've sat there and said, this is what will happen with, this is what will happen without, if you don't want it, that's fine, but at least get the advice,
Sure.
get the knowledge.
Yeah.
Once you've got the knowledge, then you can do with it what you like. A lot of people I do find, though, once you've sorted out their will, you've done their powers of attorney, put them away in a drawer, get on and live life and have a great deal of fun. And they know that everything's been sorted just in case.
Yeah, brilliant. So once again, where can people find out more about you and the firm that you work for?
Our website has got a lot of information, which is www.moreblatch.com. If you Google Fiona Heald, then you will find me at the top, hopefully without a picture.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really informative, as again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow, what a huge amount of information Fiona shared on her experience of working with the Court of Protection. I, for one, am very pleased that I have my own powers of attorney and will continue to encourage all of our clients to put them in place. In spite of the cost of creating and registering powers of attorney, the risks of not doing so are too significant, for me anyway, to contemplate. You will find links to the Government Court of Protection website and to Fiona's firm, Moore Blatch Solicitors, on our website, theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you can also subscribe to never miss an episode. If you'd like to listen to Fiona's first interview, which was all about powers of attorney, in episode 9, and that was released on the 15th of January, you can either head to our website or search for the Retirement Cafe podcast on iTunes. So until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Cafe podcast with Justin King. To find out more, you can find us online at theretirementcafe.co.uk.